Hello and welcome to Awful Commentary. This is a spoiler-free review for Captain America Civil War. Black Panther dies! Or does he? Maybe he doesn't. I'm not going to tell you, this is the spoiler-free review. This movie is great. For those fans who were hoping for a more direct adaptation of the graphic novel, that's not what you're going to get with this. Instead, Civil War has a much more narrow focus that gives it more depth in the MCU, but also explains why characters like Daredevil and Jessica Jones aren't necessarily going to be as affected by this movie as you would have anticipated. And if you came in here expecting an all-out brawl, then you're going to be disappointed again. What Captain America 3 gives is a story and a plot that is driven around two themes: friendship and loss. Because of how intertwining every movie of the MCU is, every character has a relationship with every other character, and in this movie, each one of those friendships is tested. The brother versus brother motif works because we know the Black Widow and Hawkeye are best friends. We know how Cap feels about Bucky, and we know also how Cap feels about Iron Man and vice versa. While their personalities are certainly different, we know that Iron Man would give his life to save Steve Rogers, and we know that Steve would do the same back. So seeing these two heroes, these two brothers, trying to reason with each other while we know where this is heading, it's actually kind of heartbreaking. Now, the villainous scheme that weaves throughout the plot is probably the movie's weakest point. It's not that the villain is poorly portrayed, but instead that his plan just seems like the most far-fetched thing in the entire movie. And in a movie that includes an android with a giant rock gem in his head, that's kind of not something you want. In fact, including a villain in this movie is pointless. What it does is gives the audience an excuse not to side with one team or the other. And it renders any moral dilemma that the audience or the characters have to make ultimately void because we are aware that they are being manipulated. With that being said, I did believe and understand each character's intentions in the movie. This is especially true for Black Panther, whose introduction into the MCU was handled so seamlessly that it sets the stage for the Black Panther solo movie really well. Spider-Man was also as good as people have been hoping. And it was a joy to see Paul Rudd's Ant-Man back on screen and interacting with other Avengers. It's difficult to talk more about the movie without giving things away, but here's one more caveat. Civil War requires you to have seen previous Marvel movies. Now, while this may seem obvious to regular MCU fans, for people who just want to go and see a movie and think, oh, I'll go and see the new Captain America movie, that's being hyped, they will not understand a thing. The movie requires you to understand the impact of Avengers 2. It requires you to understand the impact of Captain America 2. In fact, it requires you to even understand the previous Iron Man movies because of certain relationships between Tony Stark and other members of the cast. For most fans, and thus most people listening to this review, that's not going to be a problem. But should you take a casual viewer who doesn't know what a Sokovia is, then prepare for some confusion. Over-reliance on the previous Marvel phases aside, Civil War is a must-watch. It's difficult, I think, for it to be called a Captain America movie, but if you've been watching an Avengers film that's more personal, that interacts more with the characters and worries less about the action, this is the one for you. And if you watched Batman vs Superman and thought, but I still don't understand why these heroes are fighting, don't worry, that's not an experience that'll be repeated here. If you're lucky enough to have seen Captain America Civil War as early as I did, then put your thoughts in the description below. And if you'd like a more detailed, spoilerful description of what you've seen, then come back to Awful Commentary soon, where we'll have one that's so full of spoilers you won't even know what to do with yourself. Thank you for joining us on Awful Commentary, and we will see you again soon.